Introduction. Everyone wants results. More focus, more money, a better body, a stronger mindset, a calmer life, but very few people understand what it actually takes to get those results. And fewer still are willing to face the hard truth that change isn't built on how you feel today, or how inspired you are by a YouTube video, or how badly you want something in a moment. It's built on what you do repeatedly, especially when you don't feel like it. We've been sold a lie, a comforting, addictive lie, that motivation is the fuel we need to change our lives. That if we just find the right words, the right spark, the right hype, we'll finally unlock the drive to take action and stay committed. But the problem is motivation is fickle, it's fragile, and it's driven by emotion, which means the second life gets hard, the second resistance shows up, the second you're tired, distracted, frustrated, or bored, motivation disappears, and you're left with the same choice you always had. Show up anyway, or fall back into the cycle you swore you'd escape. This audiobook isn't about getting hyped. It's about getting clear, and it's about making peace with the truth that success in anything, whether it's business, fitness, mental health, relationships, or focus, is not built by the most motivated person in the room, but by the one who builds systems, rituals, and personal standards that make consistency automatic and discipline non-negotiable. Because discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It just asks if you're ready. Discipline doesn't wait for the mood to be right. It creates the mood through motion. Discipline doesn't rely on hope. It builds through habit, through structure, through repetition that rewires your brain and reshapes your identity from the inside out. When you're consistent, you don't need constant inspiration because your habits keep showing up even when your emotions don't. When you're consistent, you build trust, not just with others, but with yourself, and that trust becomes a quiet, unshakable confidence that no amount of external pressure can destroy. So if you're tired of relying on willpower only to burn out again, if you're tired of starting strong and ending nowhere, if you're tired of being one burst of motivation away from giving up, then this audiobook is for you. It's time to replace hype with habit. It's time to replace waiting with work. It's time to stop depending on motivation and start mastering consistency. Chapter 1. The Motivation Trap. We grow up hearing that motivation is the key to greatness. That if you want something badly enough, if you stay inspired, if you find your why, the fire inside you will carry you through the challenges ahead. But the reality is that motivation is not a strategy, it's a feeling. And like any feeling, it is temporary, fleeting, and unreliable. A fair-weather friend that disappears the moment life gets inconvenient, difficult, or just a little too quiet to keep your momentum alive. Most people don't fail because they lack the tools or the time. They fail because they're waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel energized, waiting for some wave of excitement to lift them into action. But that wave almost never comes, and when it does, it fades just as quickly, leaving behind the same routines, the same procrastination, and the same excuses disguised as logic. I'll do it tomorrow. I just need a break. I don't feel it today. And here's the trap. When you rely on motivation, you make progress conditional. You tell yourself, I'll work out when I feel like it. I'll write when I'm inspired. I'll study when I'm in the mood. But by doing that, you give away your power to your emotions. And the person who waits to feel good before taking action will always be outrun by the person who takes action regardless of how they feel. The world doesn't reward your intentions. It rewards your behavior. And behavior built on emotion is inconsistent at best and destructive at worst, because it teaches your mind that how you feel is more important than what you said you'd do. And that belief, if left unchecked, will erode your confidence, your follow-through, and eventually your identity, until you no longer trust yourself to do the things you know matter most. So what's the alternative? The alternative is discipline. The alternative is system. The alternative is consistency. Not glamorous, not flashy, not fueled by bursts of dopamine, but built brick by brick through small, repeatable actions that you carry out whether you feel like it or not. Because the goal isn't to feel motivated every day. The goal is to show up every day regardless of how motivated you feel. It's to build systems so simple, so embedded into your daily rhythm, that skipping them feels more unnatural than completing them. It's to shift from asking, "Do I feel like it?" to asking, "What does the disciplined version of me do right now?" And the more you practice that shift, the more you choose alignment over impulse, the more you build the mental callus required to outlast the friction that used to knock you off course. Understand this. Consistency creates momentum, and momentum creates identity. The first few days might feel slow, pointless, even exhausting, but with each action you take, you're casting a vote for the kind of person who doesn't flinch when things get uncomfortable. You're building a track record, and that track record becomes your new normal. Soon, what felt hard becomes habitual. What required effort becomes automatic. What seemed like a stretch becomes your standard. And that's when you realize the power was never in waiting to feel ready. The power was in moving anyway. In the next chapter, we'll break down what consistency really means, why doing a little every day beats doing a lot once in a while, and how to build habits that anchor your behavior even when everything else feels unstable. Chapter 2. What consistency really means. When most people hear the word consistency, they think it means doing something every single day without missing a beat, never failing, never slipping, never falling behind. But real consistency has very little to do with perfection and everything to do with persistence. Because consistency isn't about being flawless. It's about showing up enough times that the direction of your life changes. Even if some steps are smaller than others, even if you stumble now and then, even if it takes you longer than you thought. Consistency doesn't mean doing everything. It means doing something regularly, deliberately, and without excuse, even when it feels too small to matter, even when no one is watching, even when the result isn't immediate, because it's not the size of the action that matters most. It's the fact that you did it anyway. One workout doesn't make you fit. One journal entry doesn't make you self-aware. One focused hour doesn't make you productive. But when repeated, stacked, and protected, those small actions begin to shape something far more important than results. They shape your identity. And that's what most people miss. Consistency is not just about progress. It's about proof. Daily proof that you are becoming someone who keeps their word, who follows through, who doesn't negotiate with their goals just because the weather is bad or the mood is off or the circumstances aren't perfect. Because if you only show up when things feel easy, you'll never build the kind of inner strength that shows up when they don't. Consistency means becoming someone who trusts themselves to act, even in silence. It means building internal credibility, not waiting to be held accountable by someone else, but being the kind of person who holds themselves accountable quietly and consistently because they know what's at stake if they don't. And the truth is, you'll rarely be rewarded in the beginning. The first few days of a new habit won't feel transformational. You want to see results faster. You'll be tempted to skip because one day won't matter. But that one day always matters. Not because of the outcome, but because of what it means to your subconscious. Every time you show up, you reinforce a new pattern. Every time you keep going, you cast a vote for your future self. And the more votes you cast, the harder it becomes to identify with your old story. The one where you used to quit, the one where you used to wait, the one where you needed to feel motivated just to take the first step. The magic of consistency is that it changes you from the inside out. You become calmer. You become clearer. You stop second-guessing everything because your behavior now matches your beliefs. And when that happens, your need for external validation fades because you know, through experience, that you can trust yourself. So don't aim for perfect days. Aim for consistent weeks. Aim for long streaks of showing up, even when you're tired, even when it's inconvenient, even when progress is invisible. Because those are the days that count the most. Those are the days that bend your identity. Those are the days that separate the ones who talk about growth from the ones who live it. In the next chapter, we'll talk about self-discipline, not as a genetic gift, but as a skill that can be trained, strengthened, and installed into your daily life like a muscle you build through resistance and repetition. Chapter 3. Self-discipline as a skill, not a trait. We often talk about discipline as if it's a character trait, as if some people are simply born with it, blessed with an innate ability to wake up early, eat clean, push through discomfort, and stay focused in a world full of distractions. while the rest of us are left wondering why we can't seem to get ourselves to do the things we know are good for us. But the truth is, self-discipline has nothing to do with natural talent or genetics, and everything to do with training, because like any other skill, discipline is built through practice, repetition, and conscious reinforcement over time. Discipline is not something you either have or don't have. It's something you build. It begins not with some grand gesture or radical lifestyle overhaul, but with the smallest possible action you choose to repeat even when every part of you wants to skip it, avoid it, or postpone it. You don't become disciplined by waiting for your life to calm down. You become disciplined by creating a structure that keeps you grounded in the middle of the chaos. You don't become disciplined by learning more. You become disciplined by doing, by failing, by showing up again, by making your future self more important than your present mood. Discipline, in its purest form, is self-respect in action. The choice to do what aligns with your values even when your feelings are pulling you in the opposite direction. And just like physical strength, mental discipline is strengthened through resistance, through moments when you don't want to follow through, when it would be easier to quit, when there's no one watching, and yet you still choose to take the next step. The moment you recognize that your feelings are just weather, temporary, ever-changing, often unreliable, and that your discipline is the anchor that holds you steady through every storm, everything begins to shift. Because now you're no longer asking, do I feel like it? You're asking, what would the disciplined version of me do right now? And that version of you becomes clearer every time you make the decision to follow through. Not because you were inspired, but because you decided to become someone who finishes what they start. To build that skill, you have to train on purpose. And training doesn't mean perfection. It means repetition under pressure. It means reducing friction. It means making the right choice slightly easier to take and the wrong one slightly harder. It means removing the need to make a decision at all by building systems that make those decisions automatic. Lay your workout clothes out the night before. Write your to-do list before you go to bed. Turn off notifications. Block websites. Keep your goals visible. Make your values visible. Build your environment to support your discipline. Because if you rely solely on willpower, you will eventually lose to the path of least resistance. But when you remove resistance, when you automate your behavior, when you train yourself to show up even when it's inconvenient, you become someone whose consistency doesn't rely on motivation. It relies on structure. And once you've built that internal structure, you'll notice something powerful. The things that used to feel hard now feel normal. The behaviors that used to take effort now take less thought. And the identity you used to dream about is no longer a goal. It's just who you are. Discipline becomes your default, not your struggle. And that's when you realize you weren't undisciplined. You were untrained. You didn't lack will. You lacked a system. So train it, build it, reinforce it, protect it. And remember, every single disciplined decision you make, no matter how small, is a vote for a future where showing up is no longer something you debate. It's just what you do. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to keep that discipline alive even when life gets messy, your energy dips, and you find yourself tempted to slip. Because staying consistent when it's easy is one thing, but staying consistent when it's hard, that's where real transformation begins. Chapter 4. How to stay consistent when you don't feel like it. There will always be days when your energy is low, when your mind feels foggy, when the weight of your responsibilities feels heavier than usual, and when even the simplest habit, something you've done 100 times before, feels like a mountain you don't want to climb. And it's in these moments, the ones where everything in you whispers not today, that the strength of your consistency is truly tested. Not when it's easy or convenient or exciting, but when everything inside you wants to pause, delay, or quit. Because the truth is, no matter how disciplined you become, you will still have days where you won't feel like showing up, where your motivation disappears, your clarity fades, and the excuses begin to sound more reasonable than the promises you made to yourself the night before. And in those moments, you have a decision to make. Either you fall back into the old pattern of postponement, or you lean into the system you've built, the identity you've chosen, the small non-negotiables that keep you grounded, regardless of how chaotic or unmotivated you feel. The key to staying consistent isn't becoming superhuman. It's becoming strategic. It's understanding that your environment will always beat your willpower in the long run, which means you don't need to constantly push harder. You need to design smarter, creating habits that are easy to start, reducing friction between you and your priorities, and removing as many decisions as possible from your daily routine so that when your energy dips, your standards don't. The disciplined person doesn't rely on feeling ready. They rely on what's already in place. That means setting your workspace before you go to bed, prepping your meals when you still have momentum, deciding your workout before the morning hits, creating a routine that guides you automatically into action without asking you how you feel about it in the moment. Because the more decisions you outsource to structure, the fewer chances your mind has to negotiate with itself. And that's where consistency is born, not in intensity, but in simplicity. When you're tired, don't aim for the full version of the habit. Aim for the minimum viable version. The one push-up, the one paragraph, the one quiet moment of breath, the action so small you can't fail to do it. Because consistency isn't built by perfection. It's built by returning to the habit over and over, even if the volume of effort changes. And on the days when nothing goes as planned, when your routine is disrupted, when stress takes over, those are the days when just doing something becomes a powerful message to your mind. I'm still in control. Because consistency doesn't mean doing the same thing every day. It means staying aligned with your direction, no matter the conditions. And you reinforce that alignment not through willpower, but through what you make automatic, the mental scripts you rehearse, the environment you shape, the rules you set in advance. For example, if you normally journal for 10 minutes in the morning, but today you're late, write one sentence. If you usually work out for 45 minutes, but you feel drained, stretch for 5. If you always read before bed, but your mind is restless, skim one page. The size of the action doesn't matter. What matters is that you maintain the habit. Because skipping once is a stumble. Skipping twice is a pattern. Skipping 3 times is a return to your old self. So don't aim to be perfect. Aim to be unbreakable in your intention. Flexible in execution, but firm in identity. You're someone who shows up. You're someone who finishes. You are someone who follows through, even when it's hard, even when it's quiet, even when it's thankless. And the more you prove that to yourself, the less you rely on fleeting energy, because you've built something stronger than motivation. You've built momentum. In the next chapter, we'll dive into what happens when that momentum begins to reward you. Not just with results, but with something more powerful. Confidence, self-trust, and the quiet knowing that you are exactly who you've been trying to become. Chapter 5. The rewards of consistency. When we talk about building new habits or becoming more disciplined, we often focus on the immediate struggle, the discomfort of waking up early, the resistance to doing what we said we would do, the pushback we feel from inside ourselves when we attempt to show up with purpose instead of giving into convenience. But what we rarely talk about, and what most people don't experience long enough to understand, are the rewards of staying consistent, the subtle but powerful transformation that happens not in a single breakthrough moment, but over time, slowly and silently, as your identity begins to shift from someone who tries into someone who follows through. Because when you're consistent, even in the smallest ways, you begin to build something far more valuable than results. You build self-trust, and that trust becomes the foundation of everything else, because without it, every new goal feels like a gamble, every promise you make to yourself feels fragile, and every time you try to change, a quiet part of your mind says, "We've been here before, and we didn't stick with it." But with consistency, not perfection, but repetition, that voice begins to fade, and something new replaces it, belief. Not because you've hit every milestone yet, not because you're already where you want to be, but because you've shown yourself that you can show up, not just when it's easy, not just when you're excited, but when it's cold, when you're tired, when no one's watching and you still do the thing anyway. That's where the reward lives. Consistency teaches you to value process over performance, to recognize that progress isn't always loud or visible, and that the most important transformations often happen internally. When no one claps for you, when no one notices, when the only thing that keeps you going is the quiet truth that you're doing the right thing again and again. And that kind of discipline begins to spill over into every area of your life. Not because you force it, but because consistency has a compounding effect. A small daily action leads to a slightly better result. That better result builds confidence. That confidence makes you more likely to keep going. And with each cycle, your actions feel more natural. Your routines feel less like effort and more like identity. It's not just that you're being consistent. It's that you're becoming the type of person who is consistent. And that shift is worth more than any short burst of motivation or external validation could ever offer. You also begin to realize that consistency brings peace, because once you know you can trust yourself, you don't need to chase perfection or keep searching for the next life hack. You already have a system. You already have a rhythm. You already know how to carry yourself forward, even when the path feels uncertain. Your emotional highs and lows don't control your decisions anymore, because you've trained your nervous system to follow structure instead of chaos. And that means your life starts to stabilize, not because everything around you has changed, but because you have changed. You've stopped negotiating with your standards. You've stopped waiting for ideal conditions. You've stopped tying your identity to how you feel in the moment. And as a result, you move through your day with more clarity, more resilience, and more inner strength than you ever thought possible. Not because things are easy, but because you've learned how to respond when they aren't. That is the reward. Not just the goal you reach, but the person you become in the process of pursuing it. Someone steady, someone intentional, someone grounded in effort and no longer enslaved by emotion. Because when motivation fades, and it will, consistency remains. And when the world becomes uncertain, as it always does, your routines give you certainty, not by controlling the world around you, but by giving you a reliable framework inside yourself. So if you've ever wondered whether the small actions matter, if you've ever doubted whether the daily habits are really worth it, if you've ever felt like you're putting in effort and not seeing results fast enough, remember this: consistency is always working, even when you can't see it. You're not just doing the thing. You're becoming someone new with every rep, every choice, every return to the process. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how consistency evolves into identity, how what you do becomes who you are, and how that shift changes not just your habits, but your entire life. Conclusion: you've made it to the end, not just of this audiobook, but of a mindset that once believed motivation was the key to success, of a story that used to convince you that how you felt in the moment mattered more than what you knew was right, and of a cycle where momentum constantly faded because it was built on bursts of energy rather than the steady rhythm of daily action. By now, you understand that consistency is not just a practice. It's a foundation, a quiet superpower that outperforms talent, outlasts hype, and outshines inspiration, because anyone can act when they're excited, but very few people show up on the days when it's boring, when it's hard, when it's inconvenient or invisible or unrewarded in the moment. And yet those are the exact days that shape who you become. Discipline isn't glamorous, it's gritty. It doesn't give you immediate results. It gives you internal peace. It doesn't shout for attention. It builds self-respect in silence. And the truth is, no external voice can push you harder than the quiet belief inside that says, I keep my word, even when it's hard. And that voice only grows stronger when it's fed by action, fed by habits, fed by the simple decision to continue showing up regardless of the resistance. So wherever you are now, whether you're just beginning this journey or whether you've already built some momentum, remember that consistency is not measured in streaks. It's measured in returns, in how quickly you bounce back after a slip, in how many times you decide to begin again without apology, without drama, without starting over, just continuing forward. Because that's what the most resilient people do. They don't quit. They adjust. They don't wait. They move. They don't depend on motivation. They create structure, and that structure becomes their freedom. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to go fast. You just need to keep going. A little bit every day, a little more than yesterday, a little longer than you thought you could. And over time, those little choices won't feel like effort anymore. They'll feel like you. So take what you've learned here and turn it into something real, into a system that supports you, into a rhythm that grounds you, into a standard that becomes the new default for how you live, work, and show up in the world. Because your potential is not waiting for you to feel ready. It's waiting for you to be consistent. And now, you know exactly how. Let's begin again and again until it becomes who you are.